The moment her taillights disappeared around the bend and the quiet settled over that lonely road, I understood something I had spent years pretending not to notice. My daughter had just left me behind, and neither of us knew how we had come to this. The sound of her engine faded quickly, swallowed by distance and the tall grass whispering in the wind. I stood there with my hands in the pockets of my old brown jacket, staring at the empty curve of asphalt where her car had vanished, half expecting those red lights to return, the engine to growl again, her window to roll down so she could shout something sharp but familiar. But nothing came back. Just the wind. It moved through the grass in slow waves, the way water ripples across a pond when a stone is tossed. Somewhere far off, a truck passed along the highway, its sound dull and distant like thunder beyond the hills. Otherwise the road was empty. I remember noticing small things. Funny how the mind does that when something humiliating happens. You focus on details just to keep from thinking about the larger truth. There was a fence running along one side of the road, weathered wood bleached pale from years of sun. A mailbox leaned slightly at the corner where the gravel driveway began. I could smell dust and dry weeds. The air had that late afternoon coolness that comes right before evening settles in. I looked down at the ground and saw the faint marks where her tires had spun a little when she pulled away too quickly. She had been angry. Lord, she had been angry. And I suppose I had been stubborn. The argument had started miles earlier, somewhere outside the city when the buildings thinned and the roads widened. It had begun the way so many of our conversations did during those years, quiet at first, careful, circling around subjects neither of us wanted to touch directly. Money. Responsibility. Ownership. But really it was about something deeper than all that. It was about pride. She was driving that afternoon, one hand resting loosely on the wheel, the other tapping against the console as if she were keeping time with music that wasn't playing. The car itself was new, sleek, silver, expensive in a way that made me a little uncomfortable sitting in it. Not because I couldn't afford it. Because I remembered when she used to ride in the back seat of my old pickup truck with her legs swinging and a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in wax paper. The road stretched ahead of us in long, straight lines. Fields rolled outward on both sides, patches of early autumn color beginning to creep into the trees. She kept glancing at me as she drove. "Dad," she said finally, the word clipped and tired. "You can't keep bringing this up." "I'm not bringing anything up," I told her quietly. "I'm asking a question." "You're questioning me," she replied. The difference between those two things felt enormous to her. To me, it felt like semantics. I watched the field sliding past the window. "You remember whose name is on the deed," I said. Her jaw tightened. "I live there," she said. "That's not what I asked." She let out a short breath through her nose. "You gave it to me." "I never said that." "You bought it for me." "I bought it," I corrected gently. "For the two of us to figure out later." She shook her head, a quick sharp motion. "You always do this. You say things one way and then years later you pretend you meant something else. That's not fair." "No, what's not fair is acting like I haven't built my life there." Her voice had grown louder without either of us noticing when the change happened. The tires hummed against the pavement. The sky had that pale afternoon color that makes everything look slightly washed out. I rested my hands on my knees. "Your life is yours," I said. "I've never tried to take that away." "Then stop talking like you can." That one landed harder than she probably intended. I remember turning my head slowly toward the window so she wouldn't see my face. For a while we drove without speaking. Fields passed. Telephone poles drifted by like slow metronomes. Finally she pulled onto the shoulder of that narrow rural road. Gravel crunched beneath the tires. The car stopped. The engine kept running. For a moment neither of us moved. Then she turned toward me. Her eyes were bright with frustration, the same stubborn spark she'd had as a little girl when she refused to come inside after dark. "I can't do this today," she said. "Do what?" "This," she repeated, gesturing between us as if the space inside the car itself had become unbearable. "This constant reminder that everything I have somehow still belongs to you." I took a breath. "That's not what I'm saying." "It's exactly what you're saying." Her fingers tightened around the steering wheel. "You know what, Dad," she continued, her voice shaking slightly now. "If you think I'm so ungrateful, maybe you should just go ahead and take it back." I looked at her. I saw exhaustion there beneath the anger. Years of trying to prove something. Years of wanting independence so badly it had started to taste like resentment. "That's not why I asked," I said softly. "Then why did you?" The wind outside brushed against the side of the car. I thought about answering honestly. About telling her that I was getting older. That sometimes when I walked through that enormous penthouse, those wide glass windows looking out over the city lights, the marble counters polished smooth as water, I felt like a guest in a life I had helped build but no longer recognized. But instead I simply said, "Because things have changed." She laughed once. A short, humorless sound. "You're right," she said. Then she reached across and pushed open my door. The metal handle clicked. The door swung outward into the open air. "Well," she said, "maybe you should walk for a while and think about that." I looked at her. Really looked. For a moment I saw my little girl again, the one who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during long drives home from the county fair. But the woman sitting beside me now had walls built around her pride that I wasn't sure I knew how to climb anymore. So I nodded. Slowly. I stepped out of the car. The gravel crunched under my shoes. The wind touched my face. I closed the door gently. For a second we just looked at each other through the window. Then she shifted the car into gear. The engine growled. The tires spun slightly on the gravel. And she drove away. Leaving me standing there on that quiet stretch of road while the sound of her car faded into the distance. I stayed there longer than I probably needed to. Not because I was lost. Because I was remembering. When she was 6 years old, she used to stand at the end of our driveway every morning waiting for the school bus. She would wave at me through the window until the bus turned the corner and disappeared from sight. Every single morning. And every single morning I would stand there watching until the last flash of yellow vanished. Standing on that empty road decades later, I realized something that felt strangely calm settling inside my chest. This was the first time she had ever been the one to leave. Eventually the wind picked up a little stronger, rustling through the tall grass beside the fence. The sun had dipped lower, turning the light warmer and longer across the fields. I brushed the dust from my jacket. Then I started walking toward the highway. It took nearly an hour before a farmer in an old blue pickup slowed down and offered me a ride. He didn't ask many questions, which I appreciated. By the time I reached the city, evening had begun folding itself into the streets. Lights flickered on in office buildings. Traffic thickened. And far above it all, somewhere among the glass towers downtown, my daughter was probably stepping out of an elevator into that beautiful penthouse apartment she believed, without question, was her own. I said nothing that night. Not a call. Not a message. Just silence settling into the long space between us while something quiet and patient began taking shape in my mind. And sometime the next morning, after the sun rose pale over the city skyline, I picked up the phone and called a locksmith. He arrived a little after 10 in the morning, carrying a worn leather tool bag and the kind of quiet professionalism that comes from doing the same work for decades. The building's lobby was cool and polished, marble floors reflecting the soft light from the tall windows that faced the street. The elevator hummed as it carried us upward, floor after floor, the city unfolding outside in fragments of steel and glass. The locksmith didn't ask questions. He just glanced at the paperwork I had brought with me, nodded once, and said, "Penthouse, right?" "That's right," I replied. When the elevator doors opened, the hallway was empty and still. Thick carpet muted our footsteps. The only sound was the faint mechanical breath of the building itself, air systems moving quietly through the walls. I unlocked the door with my key. The penthouse was just as I remembered it from the last time I had visited weeks earlier. Wide glass windows stretched across the far wall, giving a view of the entire city. Morning light poured across the marble counters in the kitchen, scattering reflections across the polished surface. A bowl of fruit sat untouched on the island. A thin film of sunlight warmed the hardwood floors. It was beautiful. It had always been beautiful. When I first bought the place years earlier, the realtor had talked about square footage and skyline views and long-term property value. But none of those things were the real reason I signed the papers. My daughter had just gotten her first major promotion back then. She had been proud, but nervous. The kind of nervous people get when the world finally opens doors they had spent years knocking on. "This place is too much," she told me the first time we stood inside it together. "You'll grow into it," I said. Back then she had laughed and hugged me so tightly my glasses nearly fell off my face. Standing there years later, I realized something simple. She had grown into it. But somewhere along the way, we had grown apart. The locksmith set his bag down near the door and began working. Metal tools clicked softly against the handle as he removed the old cylinder. He moved efficiently, carefully, like a surgeon who knew every step by memory. I walked slowly through the apartment while he worked. The living room was spotless. Not in the sterile way of a staged property, but in the neat, controlled way my daughter had always kept her spaces. A folded throw blanket lay across the couch. A glass coffee table held a stack of design magazines. From the kitchen window, the entire city stretched outward like a living map. Cars crawled along distant streets far below. The river curved through downtown, catching light like a ribbon of steel. I remembered holding her hand when she was little as we crossed busy intersections. She always squeezed tighter whenever traffic rushed past. "Stay close," I used to say. Funny how time rearranges things. Now she was the one standing above it all. And I was the one learning how to step back. Behind me I heard the soft metallic snap of a new lock settling into place. "Almost done," the locksmith said. I nodded. I stood near the window and watched clouds move slowly above the skyline. When he finished, he tested the new mechanism twice. The key turned smoothly. The latch clicked with a quiet, precise sound that echoed faintly in the still apartment. "Good as new," he said, handing me 3 fresh keys. I paid him, thanked him, and walked him to the elevator. Before the doors closed, he gave me a polite nod and said, "Nice place." "Yes," I said. "It is." Then the elevator carried him down and left me alone in the hallway. For a moment I simply stood there holding the new keys in my hand. They felt small. Lighter than the weight of the decision that had brought me there. Inside the apartment the silence felt different now, not empty, but settled, like a room after furniture has finally been arranged where it belongs. I locked the door behind me and left. The rest of that day passed quietly. I ran errands. Stopped by a small diner near the park where I used to take my daughter for pancakes when she was a teenager. The same waitress still worked there, though her hair had turned completely gray. I didn't tell her anything about the morning. Just drank my coffee and watched people come and go. By evening, the city lights had begun flickering on one by one. That was when my phone started ringing. The first call came just after 6. Her name appeared on the screen. I looked at it for a moment. Then I set the phone down on the kitchen table and let it ring until the sound stopped. A minute later it rang again. Then again. Soon messages began appearing. "Dad, why is my key not working? Did something happen to the lock? Call me. Dad? The calls came in waves. Sometimes 2 or 3 close together. Then a pause. Then another attempt. I imagined her standing in that quiet hallway outside the penthouse door, maybe still in her work clothes, briefcase in one hand, phone in the other. The elevator humming softly behind her while she tried the key again and again. The polished hallway lights reflecting off the metal handle. The new lock refusing to turn. I didn't picture anger. Not at first. Mostly confusion. Maybe a little disbelief. Because until that moment, the idea that the apartment could ever be closed to her probably felt impossible. The phone rang again. Then stopped. Another message appeared. Dad, please call me. I sat at the table for a long time watching the city through my own modest apartment window. Cars passed beneath the streetlights. Somewhere nearby a dog barked once, then fell quiet. The phone eventually stopped ringing. Later that night one final message came through. Just 4 words. Can we talk tomorrow? I read it twice. Then I turned off the light in the kitchen and went to bed. I didn't sleep much. Not because I regretted the decision. Because I knew something important had shifted. The next morning I woke early and stepped outside onto my small balcony. The air carried that cool freshness that comes before the city fully wakes up. Far in the distance, downtown towers caught the first pale glow of sunrise. Somewhere among them stood that glass-walled penthouse apartment. Still quiet. Still locked. And for the first time in many years, I felt something inside me settle. Not victory. Not revenge. Just balance. Later that afternoon we did meet. In a small cafe halfway between our neighborhoods. She looked tired when she walked in. But something in her eyes had softened. We talked for a long time. Not about the lock at first. About work. About old memories. About the strange ways time rearranges families. Eventually she asked me why I had done it. I told her the truth. I realized yesterday, I said, that I'd spent a long time trying to hold the door open for you. She waited quietly. And sometimes, I continued, the only way to fix a relationship is to close the door for a while so both people remember how to knock. She didn't answer immediately. But she nodded slowly. Years have passed since that afternoon. The penthouse is still in the family. But now it's understood differently. Not as something owed. Not as something taken. Just a place. And my daughter and I, we talk more carefully now. More honestly. Because sometimes love isn't loud. Sometimes it's just a quiet decision made on a lonely road, or a new lock clicking softly into place while the city keeps moving outside the window. And the truth is, dignity rarely makes a sound when it arrives. But when it does, you feel the weight of it settle gently in your hands, like a small set of keys.